Let's talk about one of the most powerful and, honestly, one of the most dangerous forces in your financial life. It's the irresistible trap of a good story and how it can completely shape and sometimes sink your investments.
Okay, so let's just dive right in with a question that really cuts to the chase. When you look at an investment, how much of that decision is really based on the hard numbers versus how much is based on a compelling narrative that you just really want to believe? You've heard this one, right? It's the classic story of the brilliant, once-in-a-generation leader who can just see the future. It's an incredibly powerful story. It makes you feel like you're not just buying a stock, you're backing a genius on some kind of historic mission.
And then there's this one, the story of the unstoppable trend. Things like AI, electric vehicles, you name it. The whole idea that a rising tide is going to lift all boats. It's so tempting because it feels like you're just hopping on a train that's already moving at full speed.
And of course, maybe the four most expensive words in all of investing. This is the ultimate story. This is the one that tells you to forget about history, forget what the data says, because the old rules, they just don't apply anymore. It's probably the most seductive one of all. So, what is actually going on in our heads when we fall for these stories? Well, there's a name for it. It's called the narrative fallacy. And understanding why our brains are hardwired to crave a neat and tidy order over the messy truth, that's really the first step to protecting ourselves. So here is the textbook definition, but put simply, our minds are built to find patterns. We want simple cause and effect stories to explain everything. We would much rather have a clean, satisfying story, even if it's full of holes, than deal with the messy, complicated, and often totally random nature of reality. You know Nassim Taleb, who really popularized this idea, he doesn't mince words. He calls it a fraud. Why? Because these neat stories, they trick us. They make a wildly complex world seem simple and predictable, and that massively distorts how we see things, especially when it comes to those rare, game-changing events. And this quote from the Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman explains why we do it so perfectly. It's not a bug in our system, it's a feature of how our minds work. We are constantly, automatically trying to build a coherent picture of the world around us, and stories are the tool we use. The problem is when that tool starts building a fantasy instead of reflecting reality. So how does this kind of academic idea become a real, tangible danger to your wallet? Let's look at the very high cost of these stories. Think about a company that wasn't just about renting office space, but was on a mission to elevate the world's consciousness. The story was incredible, but the financial consequences, they were very real. And right here, you can see that contrast laid bare. On one side, you have the amazing story, full of these buzzwords like disruption and transformation. But on the other side, well, that's the messy reality of actually running a business. It's full of randomness, fierce competition, total uncertainty, and customers who change their minds. We fall in love with the story of a tech revolution, but we forget about the boring reality of things like long-term real estate leases.
And when we buy into that story, hook, line, and sinker, our behavior starts to change. We just stop asking the tough questions. We see billions in losses, and we twist the facts, calling it an investment in future growth. We surround ourselves with other people who believe the same story, creating this echo chamber. And before you know it, it's not just an investment anymore. It becomes part of your identity, proof that you're a smart person who got it before everyone else did.
And ultimately, we end up in this incredibly vulnerable spot. That is exactly how a company's private valuation can just plummet from $47 billion toward bankruptcy in a matter of weeks. Everyone was so busy admiring this beautiful story that they forgot to check if the emperor was actually wearing any clothes. Okay, so this is the crucial part. What can we actually do about this? How do we fight back against our own brain's wiring to make better, more rational decisions? Well, the good news is there are some very concrete steps that we can take. Here is your practical toolkit. First, just be skeptical of any story that sounds too perfect, almost like a movie script. Second, and this is a big one, force yourself to separate the story from the raw numbers. Would you still be interested without that charismatic CEO's pitch? Third, think about where the story is coming from. Fourth, actively try to poke holes in it, play devil's advocate. And finally, you have to be really honest with yourself and ask that uncomfortable question. Am I holding this because of the business or because I'm in love with the story? So all of this brings us to the single most important lesson of this entire explainer. If you remember just one thing, let it be this critical distinction between a company's narrative and its reality.
And that's it, right there. Stories can be inspiring, no doubt. They can help us understand what a company is trying to do. But admiration is not an investment thesis. The investment has to be in the tangible business, its cash flow, its competitive advantage, how it uses its money, not the fairy tale that's been woven around it.
Because at the end of the day, reality always wins. And when the music stops, you won't be left holding a great story. You'll be left holding the actual results of the business and the consequences of mistaking a good narrative for a good investment.
So I'll leave you with a challenge. Take a hard look at your own portfolio. What's one story that you've really fallen in love with? Maybe a story about a specific company or a whole sector, or maybe even a story about your own skill as an investor. Which one haven't you really questioned in a while? Because digging into that, that's where better investing truly begins. Thanks for watching.